Thought Bubble Audio.
Look, up in the sky!
You will never find the more wretched hive of scum and villainy.
Welcome to Beer with Geeks with Tim and Frank.
Who are you?
I'm Batman.
I am Iron Man.
Your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
Hi, Christopher. I'm Nero.
My name is Inigo Montoya.
You're a wizard, Harry.
A couple of guys with a couple of beers and a whole lot of pop culture nostalgia.
Make it so, number one.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Beatles.
Named the dog Indiana.
Life finds a way.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Now sit back and crack open a cold one, because it's time for Beer with Geeks.
It comes in pints?
Shaken, not stirred.
Great Scott!
I was way off. I knew it started with an S, though.
Hi, and welcome to Beer with Geeks, where two geeks geek out with beer. I'm Tim, and with me, as always, is my friend who is sad, Frank. How are you today?
Oh, I am sad. I'm sad, but I'm doing all right. How are you?
I am also a little sad. I am not going to beat around the bush. Franklin Nelson.
See
what I did there?
I do see what you did there.
Yeah, great. So, Frank, we're here to honor the memory of Stanley Lieber, otherwise known as Stan Lee, the Marvel giant, who created the Marvel Giant, the really big Marvel book. He was a giant man in his own right, Frank. I mean, honestly, he was the captain of the American industry that is Marvel Comics.
Mm-hmm.
Truly a man made out of iron, Will.
He had that X factor. He was a real X-Man.
He was a hulking presence in the comic book industry, if not, indeed, the entire world.
Exactly, and he was fantastic for decades.
Decades, Frank. You are absolutely correct. Even with his silver surfing hair, there really was.
I think Stan would have liked this.
I think so too. He would.
I think we'd be okay with the puns.
Oh my goodness, he would have loved it. So anyway, Stan Lee passed away.
R.I.P.
R.I.P. November 12th, 95 years old, born 1922.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that means he would have been older than Scotch tape and sliced bread.
Sliced bread, yeah.
Yeah, for that matter. Crazy. And so passed away, 95 years old. Stan Lee felt like a man who wouldn't die.
I know. We all kind of hoped, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because he's just been a fixture of Americana for so many decades. And the interesting thing is that he really didn't start doing the work that everyone knows him for until kind of the second half of his life. He was like in his 40s or so when he started developing the heroes and the characters that he's best known for. Right.
Well, as the story goes, so he started working at what was then Timely Comics in the 1930s. He was 18 years old, and he got the job because I think his cousin worked for Timely Comics. I think it was his cousin, and he was just like a copy boy, right? He was just a paper pusher or anything like that. And then he went off to war, like so many people did. And then he came back and he wrote westerns and romance comics and monster comics where Stan Lee got those really definable Stan Lee monster sounds like Gru, brah, and all those like just nonsense words that became monster, right?
Right.
Groot, the giant tree, and all that kind of thing. And so it wasn't until 1961 that Martin Goodwin and Julius Schwartz, publishers of Timely Comics and DC Comics and National Comics, were, as the legend goes, having this golf match, right? And DC had just released Justice League #1 to a huge success, All-Star Comics #8 and then Justice League #1. Like, hey, like we've made a lot of money putting all of our superheroes in one book together. And it's great because we didn't have to create anybody new. We just threw the characters together that people knew from other stories, and now they're getting them in one book, and they're going to pay more money. And so Martin Goodman was like, hey, that's a great idea. And so he went to Stan Lee, who was like, I want to quit comics. I hate doing this. And he
wanted to be a novelist.
Wanted to be a novelist. That's why we know him as Stan Lee. He was saving his real name, Stanley Lieber, for, quote, the great American novel that he would never actually write.
Right.
But, I mean, if he had actually done that, we probably wouldn't be talking about him the way that we're talking about him right now.
Yeah.
Which is insane.
Yeah.
And so his wife said, well, why don't you just write a book that like the way you want to write it? And this kind of coincided with Martin Goodwin coming into his office and saying, hey, I want you to create a superhero team book. I need you to create the superhero team book. And he says, okay. And so he did it, and he created the Fantastic Four, right? And what's so special about the Fantastic Four, in a lot of ways, not only just being Stan Lee's creation, but if you take a look at that first issue, they're not even wearing costumes, right? They're just, in so many ways, regular people.
Yeah.
And then when they finally get costumes, quote unquote costumes from Jack Kirby, they're just blue jumpsuits, right? They're basically, it's a uniform. Stan Lee he just wanted superheroes so badly to be relatable. Like you said, if you don't like them and they're not even if you don't like them, but if they're just not relatable, then get off of my page.
Mm-hmm.
He strove to make the readers part of the story, and that includes even being part of the Marvel Comics business with Stan's soapbox and like the Merry Marching Marvel Society and like all this different stuff that made the readers feel like they were part of a secret club.
Right.
And it's weird because like I didn't grow up with Stan's was writing comics. He had moved on way past our time of reading comics, right? But I still felt the remnants of what he was doing in the 60s and 70s all the way up into the 90s and the 2000s, right? This Merry Marching Marvel Society, like feeling like you're part of a club and that you belong somewhere. And that was Stan Lee's really thing, that everybody belongs somewhere, and that we should really push. When I say everyone, I mean everyone, right?
Mm-hmm.
This was a man who introduced the first black superhero into comics with the Black Panther, right? I mean, this is not, he's not like just a guy who's like, oh, this is a popular thing that people were doing. He was doing it before anybody else was doing it, and that's huge. And yeah. His importance on the comic industry obviously cannot be overstated. We don't get modern entertainment the way that it is without Stan Lee. It just doesn't exist. Comic books existed long before him, sort of. I mean, he was alive when they were created, but I mean, the important comic stories were in decades when he was around. But modern comic storytelling comes from Stan Lee.
Yep.
And it also comes from important people around him, like Steve Ditko and Jack Kirby. And, there's always those stories about, the feuds between Jack Kirby and Stan Lee, and how Jack probably did do a lot of the storytelling, and Stan Lee really just went in and filled in the words. But you can't underestimate his power, Stan's power as an editor, as a showman. I think that the Marvel released like a 4-minute tribute video to him, and in there, I can't remember who it is. I think it might be Joe Quesada, who's the chief creative officer. I think it was him that he talks about like the P.T. Barnum aspect of Stan Lee.
Yep.
Stan Lee could sell himself as Stan Lee just as well as he could sell one of his creations or even somebody else's creation. It's pretty amazing. Frank, you say some things about Stan Lee now.
He really was, as much as it's pretty well documented, a lot of the disputes he had with his fellow, co-creators. He really was the architect of the modern, comic book storytelling system and of modern devices that are used in comic books. And yeah, it does start in many ways with Fantastic Four. And that's while, as you said, while comics had existed for decades, and while even the Fantastic Four was meant to be Justice League is doing well, let's have our own version. As much as that's all true, it's still like you have to see the really, really significant contributions he made and the groundbreaking approach that he had of making heroes relatable. Prior to Stan Lee and prior to his success, heroes were by design up on a hill, up on a pedestal. They were, they would come down to save the humans and sort of be separate all the time, right? I mean, you had, of course, Bruce Wayne lived among the people, Clark Kent lived among the people. You had that, of course, but they were set apart and better in a way, and they were figures to be, lauded and appreciated. And Stan's heroes were much more human, much more personable, much more like the readers. Again, by design, because he thought he had this novel but pretty straightforward idea of what if the superhero was a teenager and he had all the regular teenager problems.
Right, and that's Spider-Man is the first teenage superhero, right? There were a lot of sidekicks before Spider-Man rolled around.
They were always sidekicks.
But they were always sidekicks. Spider-Man is the first one to be like, hey, I'm just a kid.
Yeah.
And I wear a full bodysuit, so I can literally be anybody.
Right, right. Absolutely.
Which is, anybody could be Spider-Man. It's one of the staying powers of that character. But even Stan's brilliance, I think, in that first Spider-Man issue can't really be overstated, because the issue kind of starts with everyone making fun of Peter Parker in the worst way. I mean, in the worst way, as it's very after-school special kind of making fun of, to get its point across. But Peter, in that story, even deliberately one day I'll show them all. And
Yeah.
Very easily could go the supervillain route in
That's
that
true.
very moment. Oh my
true.
God, I'll show them all. My God. And so, but what's crazy about that issue, so much happens, right? He gets bullied, he gets bit by a spider, and he decides to make money, and you see his aunt and uncle love him, and then he lets the robber go, and he his Uncle Ben dies because of it. Spoiler. And so he gets boiled. No, he doesn't get it because rice.
Wow.
I know. So, and so all of this, and Peter, hunts down the guy, and he says, "Oh, this is my fault. I could have stopped him, but I didn't." Great power comes great responsibility. Stan even said, quoted a throwaway line, didn't think that with great power comes great responsibility would be a thing that would follow him the rest of his life.
And yet,
there it was. But what's crazy about Spider-Man is that it starts with Peter getting bullied, and he's sad and angry and depressed, and then he gets superpowers, and he makes money, and all this different, and gets a cool costume, all this stuff. And the very last panel of that first issue of Spider-Man, or Amazing Fantasy 15, is Peter walking home in the Spider-Man costume. Not swinging, it's not triumphant, he is sad, realizing that he could have saved his uncle's life. They'd still all be together if he had just done something.
Yeah.
And so instead of Spider-Man triumphantly swinging into the sunset, being like, saved the day, go me, love being a superhero, he's walking home sad. Not driving, not taking the subway, not swinging by a web. He's walking. It's a crazy... it's a crazy up and down through the whole issue, and that's where Stan Lee's brilliance really shone through with moments like that. It wasn't just about being a superhero; it was about who else was under that mask.
Yes,
and that's where a lot of stories, like Bruce Wayne was just the vehicle to get so he could be Batman.
Right.
And you didn't get that. You didn't get that with Stan Lee, and it's an amazing thing. Do you remember the first Stan Lee comic you ever read?
It probably was Amazing Fantasy 15.
Really?
Yeah. The first thing that an issue actually written by him. Yeah, it probably was Amazing Fantasy 15 around the time that the Sam Raimi Spider-Man first one came out.
Oh, cool.
Yep. I remember getting that DVD and watching the hell out of the bonus features. And there were a whole bunch of featurettes and things on that DVD where they talked about the origin of the character and the first appearance and all that stuff. And I really, really was interested in that and went ahead and found Amazing Fantasy 15 and read it and was like, oh, this is a really and at the time I wasn't used to that sort of style of writing. And if you look back, while as much as it is groundbreaking, it's a slower paced, different style of writing.
Oh boy, isn't it?
And much more wordy and much less flashy, and it's just not the same as modern writing. But so I was like, oh wow, this is how comics used to be. Like this is how the Silver Age of comics was, and I learned a lot about the Silver Age of comics just from doing that, and actually read a bunch of other stuff too. I
actually have the first issue of Fantastic Four open right in front of me.
Oh, nice.
Calm down, it's a reprint. People out there, I don't have billions of dollars, or do I? No,
not anymore.
No, because I spent it on Fantastic Four #1. Right? Yeah. So the first issue. So here are the first Stan Lee words. Here, you ready? With the sudden fury of a thunderbolt, a flare is shot across the sky over Central City. 3 awesome words take form as if by magic, and a legend is born. 2 exclamation points. Because that was Stan! Exclamation points on everything.
Oh yes.
He loved those. He loved those exclamation points. So, but you're right. That's just one panel, and then the next panel, and then there's some dialogue, and then the next panel. Above all the hubbub and excitement, one strange figure holds a still smoking flare gun. One strange man who is somehow more than just a man, for he is the leader of the Fantastic Four. It's great. It's like that's a whole paragraph for one panel.
Right. You'd never get that today.
No, never, ever. It would just the art. You would let the art kind of tell the story.
Totally.
And what's crazy as Stan's style really kind of evolves, that writing never really stops. Stan loved to talk and he loved to write, and so you never really see that go away. Like really, except until when you get into the 70s, I'd say that's really when he starts to really focus more on dialogue than anything else.
Okay.
Yeah, my first issue of a Stan Lee comic, as I'm sure you were wondering. I'm sure you weren't, but I'm going to tell you.
That was my next question. Yeah,
I'm going to tell you anyway.
Yeah.
So when I was a kid, my parents got me a book called Spider-Man versus the Green Goblin.
Oh, yes.
I still have it. It's right
We've
here.
Talked about this. Yes.
Yeah, it's still right here.
Was that your first graphic novel ever? First comic book ever?
I would say it's my first graphic novel ever,
yeah.
too. Yeah. It's just I'm holding on to my second copy. A cat that we used to have tore up my first copy naturally. So I had to get another one just because it was, my first one.
Of course, yeah.
And so it has Amazing Spider-Man 17, The Return of the Green Goblin, and then Amazing Spider-Man 96, and now the Goblin, and Amazing Spider-Man 97, and The Grip of the Goblin, and 98, The Goblin's Last Grasp. So that's 4 Stan Lee books.
Nice.
Till Amazing Spider-Man 98, and then Jerry Conway takes over in 121, the night Gwen Stacy died. Spoiler. The 122 Goblin's Last Stand, and then Best of Enemies, Spectacular Spider-Man 200. So I had 4 Stan Lee comics to read.
Wow.
Over and over and over again, some Ditko stuff and whatever. And I cannot tell you how many times I just read this stuff over and over and over and over again. I loved Stan Lee's dialogue.
Sure, of course.
I don't know why, even particularly as a kid, I think that it was just something really dynamic about it, and that later came across in his personality. And as you know, like watching those VHS tapes of, Spider-Man and, Spider-Man is Amazing Friends, and, he would always narrate over all of those, cartoons, because when he moved on from comic publishing, he moved to Hollywood to basically sell the license of all these characters to make cartoons and movies and all of this stuff. And so,
he spent decades trying to make a Spider-Man movie happen. Like that was like 20 years in the making by the time it happened.
Exactly. And I mean, the projects that originally came out that he fought for are, can we say, not great. Most of them are.
A lot of them are not.
A lot of them are not great, but they just paved the way for something even better. And so by the time Stan died just a few days ago, he saw, I think it was you that had said to me, he saw his last-ditch effort to make a comic book that he wanted to make basically turn itself into the worldwide entertainment industry.
Yeah. I mean, Marvel is the biggest thing in entertainment right now. I mean, it's in comics, yes, but it's in TV, it's in movies. They're like the highest grossing films of the day. It's just this morning we were talking with our group text, and somebody said, wait, when's the next Marvel movie coming out? Where there was only, how many did we get our winter Marvel movie for the year? Like these are things we like plan our year around. Is when's the next Marvel movie coming? When's Avengers 4 coming? Like these are the things that we look forward to, and this all is out of the mind of this man, or at least co-created by this man, and he championed these characters to be on the big screen, and it took him years and years and years, but he finally did it, and he lived to be 95 years old to do like 30 cameos in these movies, and
with more coming too,
with more on the way.
Yeah,
yep. They pre-filmed some.
Yeah, they pre-filmed like 9 cameos or something like that.
That many?
Yeah, and they used some. They've used some already.
Oh, I see.
They've used some of those, so I'm not sure how many are left. I'd say maybe a handful.
Sure.
I'd say between maybe 3 or maybe 2 to 4.
Sure.
Are left, but still, like we're gonna still see some Stan.
Yeah,
which is pretty great. It's not
4 is a good 1 or 2 years worth of cameos.
Exactly. I mean, even it's funny because like talking about like these Marvel movies and everything like that. Even it's not just Marvel movies; it's most of them are his characters in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, right?
Yep.
So if you watch that original Avengers film, that first one, Captain America is Joe Simon and Jack Kirby, right? So let's push that to the side. Black Widow is. I don't know who Black Widow is actually.
Look up.
Can you do a one
Yes.
double lookup? Nick Fury and Black Widow.
So you're using both of our lookups.
Because thanks. I was thanks because I'm fairly certain that neither are created by Stan Lee. I'm actually almost 100% positive that neither are created by Stan Lee. Iron Man is his creation. Iron Man was made on a bet. Somebody bet him that he couldn't make an unlikable superhero, and he was like, "Well, I'll show you. This guy's going to be a jerk and a weapons manufacturer." And now Iron Man is one of literally the most popular superheroes on the planet.
I know, right?
Crazy.
Natasha Romanoff was created by editor and plotter Stan Lee, scripter Don Rico, and artist Don Heck.
Well, there you go.
So Natasha was.
So that means that in the original Avengers lineup, Iron Man is created by Stan Lee, Hulk is created by Stan Lee, Black Widow is created by Stan Lee, Captain America is not.
Nick Fury was created by Jack Kirby and Stan Lee.
And Nick Fury is created by Stan Lee. It's Hawkeye is not created by Stan Lee, let's say. If he is, that means that every Avenger... I mean, you can't even really count Nick Fury because he's just, he's S.H.I.E.L.D. But But that makes sense because Shield is a Stan Lee creation.
Yeah,
so
that does
of
make
course
sense.
Nick Fury would be a Stan Lee creation. That of course
Sure.
makes sense.
Yeah.
So
yeah, he created all of those characters.
he created all those characters.
Or let's say he was involved in the creation of all those characters.
That's right. Yeah, because let's say Black Widow was probably more Don Heck and whoever you said the writer was.
There's another Don. Yeah, Don Heck and Don
Rico. Right. So that's just that, But then you get, the second movie with Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver and Ultron and Loki and Thor. Obviously. Obviously, technically, also didn't really create them.
Yeah,
but still, they're there. They were his book. It's just crazy that it's not just Stan Lee created one or two of them. No, he made all of them.
Yeah.
We just did an episode on Daredevil season 3. Thank you, Stan Lee. That's a Stan Lee creation. Now, the reason that character is kind of beloved the way that it is now is because of Frank Miller, not because of Stan Lee. Just kind of in the way that the X-Men are beloved because of Chris Claremont, not really because of Stan Lee. X-Men didn't sell well under Stan Lee.
Right.
But that doesn't, discontinue the fact that, or discount the fact that, he created them. It's insane. It's completely insane.
It's crazy. It's crazy the amount of the number and the just the vastness of the characters he created. You mentioned something earlier about Spider-Man that Spider-Man, because he's in a full bodysuit and a mask, he could be anybody. And I got to just last week I got to see Brian Michael Bendis speak at MIT. He gave a lecture, the Julius Schwartz lecture, which by the way is up on YouTube, and I'll put a link in the show notes.
Oh, great!
It's long; it's an hour and 45 minutes, but it was more of a Q&A session, and it was delightful and wonderful. But also he mentioned exactly what you just said. So yeah, he said that was so important to him as a young kid growing up in, I think it was Cleveland. Bendis said that was the fact that Spider-Man could be anybody was huge to me, but it didn't dawn on me, he said, until he's Bendis is the father of I think 4 or 5, and it's a multiracial family. His kids are adopted and they're all of different backgrounds. And he said it wasn't until I became a father of a multiracial family that I realized just how important it was, that my kids, any of my kids could play Spider-Man. They'll play with their friends and someone will be like, okay, you be this character, you be that character, because you be Black Panther because you're black, you be this kid because you're white, whatever. But anybody could be Spider-Man. And that really, I thought that was very powerful and really, really, beautiful that there's a character that anyone can see themselves as. We talk about representation and how great it is that Black Panther was such a hit and such a good movie and everything, but the fact that anybody can be Spider-Man, and you've got a Miles Morales animated movie hitting theaters, that's pretty awesome. Mm-hmm. That's pretty awesome for people who grew up feeling like they weren't represented somewhere. So that's a big contribution that Stan Lee gave us. So that is, that's nothing small and definitely is worth mentioning. Do you remember his DC books?
Yes, the Stan Lee imagined.
Just imagine, DC, yeah. Stan Lee's Batman, Stan Lee's Superman. It was that maybe not his best work, but they're very interesting. They're very, very interesting. He did 10 or 12 of them, and it's interesting to see his take on, let's take these godlike heroes and make them sort of normal characters as he does. And yeah, it was a really interesting experiment.
It was an interesting thought experiment. Yeah. They're not, like you said, they're not anything to necessarily write home about. That's not the version of, let's say, Batman that I want to see.
Right.
But I love that they gave him that chance. Even DC was that was what they actually posted was this, Stanley imagine, like, hey, he was important on both sides of the pond or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's great. To kind of wrap up our conversation, what's your favorite Stanley cameo?
Oh, that's easy. It's Amazing Spider-Man in the library.
Yeah, that's mine too.
Yeah, it's the best one.
That's
the best one.
It's so good. It's hilarious when they're just fighting, the Lizard and Spider-Man just fighting behind him. It's a great scene. I also like Age of Ultron, where he's the World War II vet, and he's like, "You're just trying to scare us."
Oh yeah,
and
sure.
then he leaves drunk. He's like, "Excelsior."
Yes, I forgot he says it in that one.
It's Excelsior. I love when I think it's Spider-Man 3, where he's like, "Well, I guess someone can make a difference." Enough said, and then that's a good one.
Yeah, enough said.
Yeah.
I know, love it.
Yeah,
Oh, it's so good.
His Mallrats cameo is great.
Yes. I just rewatched Mallrats a couple months ago.
Did you really?
In a while, and I'd forgotten that he'd done a cameo. Yeah. Oh, so many good ones. What's the one where he's a bus driver?
Bus driver he's a bus driver.
Yeah, I don't remember. Well, we use our lookup, so I guess we'll just have to leave that one to
bus driver. He drives a truck in Thor.
Oh, maybe it's a truck. Maybe it's
like where he pulls like they're trying to get Mjolnir and it Mjolnir. And like the bumper falls off, and he's like, "Did we get it?"
Oh yeah, that's the one. That's it. Yeah.
Is that what you're thinking of?
That's the one. That's the one.
He's on a bus in Doctor Strange.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's reading some trippy philosophy book or like an MC Ector book or something like that. Is that what the artist, the trippy stairs?
MC Escher. Yeah,
MC
but
Escher.
you know what?
Yeah. I
just remembered. No. I'm thinking of when he's the school bus driver in Spider-Man Homecoming.
I don't remember that at all.
When they're they are going to, and I don't remember. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, but it's. Oh no! Wait a second. It wasn't Spider-Man: Homecoming. Wasn't it Infinity War?
Oh,
think that.
Yep.
When Peter asks Ned for a distraction?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, you are correct. You are absolutely correct.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. But the Thor one is better. Honestly, did I get it?
Yeah, I love that. I love that one in Winter Soldier where the costume is gone. And and he's like, "Oh man, I am so fired."
Yeah. That's a really good one too.
That's a great one.
So many good ones.
There's so many good ones, and of course his starring role as Willie Lumpkin in the Fantastic Four films, the actual Marvel character Willie Lumpkin.
Oh man, yeah.
It's great stuff. I'm going to miss Stanley a lot. Not that I knew him, but I was really close to him once. Did I tell you this?
No, tell me.
I was at a convention that he was at, and he was kind of mobbed on the floor. It wasn't like but he had just stopped to talk to people. Like it wasn't like oh no, I don't have time for you. Like someone was like, oh hey, it's Stan. And he was like, oh hi, and then he just kind of had this little crowd around him, and everyone was super respectful. And everything like that, but I was probably like, I don't know, 10 feet maybe from him, something like that. He was taller than I thought. He was tall. I was kind of surprised.
I read a story just today about Stanley from this was, I actually don't know what film this was from, but one of the last ones from the last couple of years. This actor who had a sort of a small part was going to get to have was going to be working with Stan during his cameo in whichever film this was, and they kept saying, all right, you got to shoot the scene, and then Stan has to be up by 5, and they kept saying all day long, Stan's got to be up by 5, Stan's got to be up by 5, you got to pick up the pace, we're running behind, Stan's got to be up by 5. And he finally gets to go over and say hello to Stan, and he's like, oh, I don't know, you don't know me, but I've been a big fan of your work. And he's like, oh, that's great. Oh, are you my co-star? Okay, you're my co-star. Great. And so he kept calling him his co-star or whatever. And he's like, you made your work meant so much to me. Oh, that's great. Thank you so much. Whatever. And at the end, it's 5 o'clock, and they've only shot half of what they need from Stan. And they go to him, and they're like, Stan, we're really sorry. and we know it's 5 o'clock and you have to go. And he just sort of stares blankly. And it's like, oh, his handlers said that he had to be out by 5. He didn't actually have to. Okay, got it. And he's like, well, we know you have to be out by 5. Can do you think you could stay for another 30 minutes or so? And he's like, well, we should stay until it's done, right? And his handler comes over and he's like, yeah, but remember, you have Joni's waiting for you at home with dinner. That's why he had to be out by 5, was because his wife was waiting with dinner on the table.
Cute.
So he calls her and he's like, "Oh, Joni, we need another. It's going to be we need another 30 minutes to finish the scene." And she goes, "Okay, you boys have fun." And then he stays and they finish the scene.
That's hilarious. I love that.
I just love everything about that. It just melted my heart.
I love that. He just needed to get home to have
dinner with his wife of 70 years. That's just so beautiful.
Amazing. I remember the beginning part of that story. I can't remember what. I want to say it was Robert Downey Jr. Or something like that. But I can't. But I can't remember exactly. But I do remember that beginning part of the story. Okay, you're my co-star.
Yeah.
You're like, oh my God, you're whoever you are. You're Chris Hemsworth or Chris Evans or whoever. That's awesome.
I regret that I never got to see him at a convention. I never met him. I wasn't going to pay $400 for a photo op, but now part of me is like, maybe I should have.
Cause I had that thought today because I had those opportunities.
Yeah.
And I just didn't take them. But you know what? You can only,
I'm trying to remember if I ever saw him like from across the convention hall or something, but I don't think I did. But
yeah. Yeah, I saw him give a talk, and I saw him.
Oh, cool!
Yeah, he was great. He was so dynamic. It was just exactly what you would think.
Yeah,
it was great.
Yeah. Well, enough said.
Enough said, Frank. Now, see, we rolled right into it. So to cap off, what are you drinking?
I am drinking a. So you've heard of New Belgium Fat Tire?
I have.
But this is a New Belgium Fat Tire Belgian White.
Ooh.
So it's different from your typical Fat Tire, which I think is an ale. But this one is a Belgian White, and it is wonderful. It is a Belgian-style, delicious white ale, and I'm a big fan of it.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, it's real good. I got it in a like variety pack with a bunch of other New Belgium stuff. So, I recommend checking it out if you get the chance. What have you been drinking?
So, Frank, I have recently had to go gluten-free.
Yes.
Not by choice. God, not by choice.
Right.
I will miss you, gluten. But, so I have turned to Omission Brewing Company, the gluten-free beer, because Lord knows they've been my savior. Now, there are 4 different types of Omission beer, Frank. I'm not sure if you're aware of this. So there is their traditional lager, which we've had on the show before.
Yes.
I am having an Omission Pale Ale.
Nice.
They're hoppy and easy drinking gluten-free beer. It's really good. The hops are really there, and but it's still light. Like you don't feel like your stomach wants to explode at the end.
Yeah.
Sometimes mine does. So it's pretty. Omission is great. I'm so happy they're around.
Me too. I really like their stuff. You had the light golden ale last time or a couple weeks ago?
I think so, yeah. The Ultimate Light is what it's called.
Ultimate Light, okay. Yeah. And so now you got the pale ale. Nice. Solid. Solid. Yep. I love their stuff. It really doesn't taste or drink any differently than a beer that has gluten in it. It's unbelievable to me that it's a gluten-free beer. It's incredible.
It's awesome. I love it.
Yep. So good.
Well, good, Frank. So you can find us on the internet, beerwithgeeks.com, and Gmail and Facebook and Twitter at beerwithgeeks. You can, of course, rate and review us on iTunes and find us on Spotify and Google Play and all other podcast listening apps. And, of course, you can head over to patreon.com/thoughtbubbleaudio to give us even $1 a month to keep the lights on. 25 cents a week. It's not that bad.
That's all it
takes. And you get all the fun audio content that is out there. A lot of it is Supergirl related, but you also get a lot of behind-the-scenes cut stuff that Frank and I just riff on stuff for whatever reason we want to, and because sometimes we're just recording and get off topic before we even start technically recording an episode.
Plus, you get episodes of this show before they go out to the public.
Right, exactly. And do we do that with other shows, Frank, or is it just this one?
We've been known to do it with Academy Rewind as well.
Oh, well, Frank, that's just the other show that I do. He does it's crazy.
It is, isn't it? Yeah,
oh, my
crazy.
goodness, crazy. Listen to it. Anyway. Anyway, so that is it. You can find me at TimothyPG13 on Twitter, and you can find Frank at Frank Ramblings.
Yes,
his
sir.
real last name, believe it or not.
Sure, we'll go with that.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. Yep. All right, well then, until next time, for Stan,
Excelsior.